what is up, fellow Endless? So it has been a while since I've made a Sandman video, and do you know how good it feels to be talking about the Sandman again? So with that being said, it's time to talk about when we're gonna get more Sandman, as I've noticed a lot of people have been asking themselves what exactly is going on with the Sandman Season 2, and what is actually the deal behind why it's not even being viewed as a Season 2 in the first place. I mean, some of you may not know that, and it's kind of funny because I put Season 2 in the title, but, you know, how else do you call the upcoming season of the Sandman something? But this is exactly what we're getting into. So if you're a bit confused about that, and also just want to be up to date with what we know, here's an everything we know so far to get you up to speed with what's going on and what interesting changes they're making in, again, I want to say the Sandman Season 2, but the upcoming Sandman stuff. So if you love all things the Sandman, DC, news, reviews, breakdowns, this is the place for you, so do consider subscribing, help me boost my numbers, and I'm sure you'll enjoy some future content on this channel, and it'll go a long way if you help support this video and get other Sandman fans in the know with everything that we know so far by leaving a like on this video. So, one of the most interesting aspects we've learned of the upcoming new season of the Sandman is that, as I just said, it's not being referred to as the Sandman Season 2, of which you typically expect. You know, you got the Sandman Season 1, so if it gets renewed, like it has, it took a while to get renewed, quite a while, but when it gets renewed, you get the Sandman Season 2. Well, no, Dream of the Endless is a little bit different here, and even though Netflix hasn't straight up come out and said why they're not calling it Season 2, quite a few fans feel like it's written on the wall as to why this is the case. So first of all, just to tackle it this way, that the Sandman in the source material isn't exactly a linear story. At times it can feel a bit like a pinball in a pinball machine, if you will. It starts off shooting up in a straight line, but it can be just whacked all over the place in interesting ways. And to further that analogy, it has moments of cohesion, of course, in where you might have Dream escape Roderick Burgess's imprisonment, as we saw in those beginning episodes, return to the dreaming, and along the way retrieve his totems of power, then he runs into Johanna Constantine, so on, so forth, right? But each chapter along the way in Dream's journey in the source material consists of so many self-contained stories at the same time, and where they may vastly change the tone of what you might have just been previously taking in. And so when you feel like you're following a bit of a main plot, if you will, all of a sudden you might be propelled back in time to where there's a story about Dream having been married to Calliope, and now all of a sudden Dream is going by a different name. And we actually got a little bit of a preview of that in the bonus episode where we actually saw Calliope and we got teases of their past together. But anyway, whether you're an old fan or if you're new to the series and you only experienced the Sandman through the Netflix show, you might have observed this yourself, that both halves of the season may have felt quite a bit different from each other, tonally speaking. Some examples of this are when they actually tried to make more of an attempt to tie stories such as Men of Good Fortune, where we had Dream visit Hobgadling every 100 years, a bit more into what was already going on in the plot, as that episode was presented in like a double whammy episode, if you remember, since it started off with Dream spending time with his sister Death, which adapted the sound of her wings. Now again, not to forget that there was another aspect of cohesion in the back half of the season when the show started adapting volume 2 of the source material, The Doll's House, in where it got into Rose Walker, her grandmother, the whole situation of her being a dream vortex. But before we revisit this line of discussion, this is where we get Mason Alexander Park, who plays Desire in the show, talking about exactly what we're discussing with regards to Season 2, but not Season 2, and when Sandman is filming. And most interestingly, they kept referring to the new format of how the new episodes could be brought to fans. Netflix has not gone on record as calling it a Season 2. On purpose, and so I will, from now on and in the future and in perpetuity until the end of the universe, will not refer to it as a Season 2, until we know what it is. There is more Sandman coming in a really cool way, and it can take many forms. We're starting shooting in the summer, and we're gonna tackle the next huge chunk of stories in however long that might take, and I'm really excited to share the format of what that might be with everybody eventually. So Mason Alexander Park clearly like teasing between the lines there that, okay, well, this definitely isn't being referred to as season 2, but there is somewhat of a new format that is blatantly going to be happening, but can't really get into it too much right now. But if we explore that a little bit further, we have had some additional comments from an article published by Variety in December titled Inside the Sandman's Lengthy Renewal Journey and Why Netflix Still Won't Call It a Season 2. And it just keeps reminding me how long it did actually take to get renewed. This article saw the Netflix head of scripted series Peter Friedlander talk about this a little bit more, saying, "We wanted to spend the time to get creatively aligned around what would be the next best experience with the Sandman. And because of that, we wanted to spend time with the showrunner Allan Heinberg and Neil and really talk through and be thoughtful about what the approach should be. Because season 1 is also very thoughtful and intentional, so that was really what took the extra time, is to get our ducks in a row. I'm very excited about what we have in store, and we have made some great decisions around where this will go." But the article goes on to say, "But why not call it a season 2? Friedlander responded, "There are decisions that haven't been made, but we are considering batching approaches. Everything's on the table when it comes to Sandman. It's an innovative show." So to revisit what we were saying before with this, but also in combination with what Mason Alexander Park was saying, the decision to kind of go in this direction stems from maybe one of the only criticisms that the show had, especially those who were completely new to the Sandman at the time, in that the first half of the season felt kind of vastly different to the back half. But the thing is, you can tell that even though Netflix's The Sandman is incredibly faithful to the source material, that they were attempting to weave together a comic story that often takes off on its own in the middle of the storytelling into a whole other story. And they tried to make it cohesive in the format of streaming shows that we are all usually familiar with. And you can tell that they struggled just a little bit with that. And what I mean by that is that they struggled with adopting the typical formulaic approach to streaming shows. But the brilliance of The Sandman in the source material is that it's a crazy roller coaster ride with stories that range from all the tones imaginable. With even more examples of this with the bonus episode that we got at the end of the season, incorporating the stories of A Dream of a Thousand Cats and Calliope. But with the new Sandman and when it returns, they're really embracing the approach the comics have. Hence why it's not going to be called nor referred to as Season 2, because as you can probably tell by now, branding it Season 2 makes it come across as there's more of a linearity to it. Whereas if it's labeled as something like all new episodes of The Sandman, it feels like, hey, I wonder what Dream is up to this time. The thing is, and I do want to stress this with regards to the future of The Sandman, I don't want to get across as though every single new episode coming our way is going to be a completely different tale and there's going to not be any kind of continuation of things that we clearly saw set up from season 1. Because of course, stories are still going to continue with regards to like Lucifer's grudge against Dream after she felt humiliated in hell, and in the final scenes of season 1, we even see her conspiring with Azazel and the Lords of Hell against their mutual enemy, Dream of the Endless. So granted that, you might get new episodes and there might be a tale here or there adapting certain issues within those volumes of The Sandman, it's not going to be like when Dream talks to Lucifer again, that there's no continuation of the conversation and backstory and history and drama that they were getting into in the episodes we saw in season 1. It's just not as typical of that of a presentation that they're going to go with than that of your typical streaming show. And so with all that being said and done, what is it that we could exactly see? Well, it could be likely that we get a number of episodes released at a time, somewhat in a batch, if you will, without releasing the whole episode count at once. Similar to that of how we did get that bonus Dream of a Thousand Cats / Calliope episode randomly. Or perhaps instead of having like only 3 at a time, they could adopt the approach in where they split it down the middle, as Netflix sometimes does with their seasons right now. For example, I believe You has released part 1 right now, and then they'll release part 2, I guess, in a couple of months from now as well. So this way, they could still adapt 2 new volumes in the entirety of the new episodes we get of The Sandman. But instead of releasing it all at once and not calling it season 2, the story through the episodes released will feel more authentic to the frequent shifts the comics often showcase. One thing I wanted to address in this video is if anyone has any concerns with how this could still maybe get cancelled, despite it still getting renewed. And this is being brought up because, believe it or not, Netflix has reversed this order for some shows and second seasons despite literally renewing them, such as Inside Job. So this is what Neil Gaiman had to say about a fan who was expressing that concern. Define safe. Netflix could go out of business before more Sandman launches, a new, nightmarish pestilence could close the world down completely, the actors could all be eaten by weasels, and the show would be shuttered. But if there's a Netflix and nothing unforeseen or tragic happens to close the world or the show down, then there will be more Sandman. So Neil Gaiman, no matter what conspiracy theories may be out there with how, yeah, but still Netflix has reversed their order for some other shows and they got a season 2, he seems to have had absolute assurances by higher ups at Netflix that, trust me, you are getting this. Like, we're not going to reverse it. Like, you're going to get it, if he's being that confident that the only thing that might prevent this from ever happening again is if the world closes down or something worse. So as we know, Sandman Season 1 adapted Volume 1, Preludes and Nocturnes, and Volume 2, The Doll's House. So naturally, more episodes coming our way, you would think, would adapt Volume 3, Dream Country, and Volume 4, Season of Mists. The thing is, Volume 3, Dream Country, was largely, I would say, adapted in the bonus episode, A Dream of a Thousand Cats and Calliope, with a couple of stories still yet to go, and those would be A Midsummer Night's Dream, and where we'll see William Shakespeare return, because if you remember in that episode where we saw Dream visit Hobgadling every 100 years, he then got fascinated with William Shakespeare, and that was kind of like the little prelude to this upcoming story in Volume 3, Dream Country, coming our way. So I'm sure the beginning of new episodes coming our way will tackle that, and then all that remains from Dream Country is the Facade issue, which would then springboard us into what I'm very, very much so looking forward to, Volume 4, Season of Mists, of which we'll get into the much anticipated Endless Family meeting. And yeah, comic book fans will know about that, but this is where truly a lot of fun will be happening there. And, you know, lots of fans were saying, well, I want to see more of the other Endless, you know, what's going on there. This volume as well, we have Dream going back to hell, so maybe we'll pick up with Gwendolyn Christie's Lucifer and whatever she was planning with Azazel there. And that's an interesting thing in of itself, because in the Sandman story, that there wasn't really that ending scene where Lucifer is like conspiring with Azazel and the Lords of Hell to take the fight to the Dreaming. It actually goes a little bit of a different direction. However, with what Gwendolyn Christie's Lucifer said, with how she's going to do something that would like really piss off God, those who are familiar with the source material might be thinking the same thing right now. I think they'll be sticking accurate with regards to what happens with Hell and what that will mean for Dream in the future. That could be her own secret weapon. And I would say that because Dream Country only has a couple of stories left, you could argue we could bleed into Volume 5, but maybe they won't do that, because I feel like Volume 4, Season of Mists, could fulfill the remaining episodes that we get of the batch of new episodes, because there's a lot that goes on there, but I could be wrong and they could dribble a little bit of Volume 5, just kind of like they did dribble that with Volume 3, Dream Country, with the bonus episode at the end of Season 1. But my fellow Endless, that is unfortunately more or less everything that we know so far about the upcoming episodes of the Sandman. Again, almost said season. I can't wait. Honestly, I do not remotely mind them taking this stance of not referring to it as a Season 2, because it does feel a bit more comic booky there. It's still obviously going to follow a linear-esque approach to the volume order, I'm sure, but just the stories in of itself, they'll have their own identity depending on the episode. And honestly, as I keep referring to, the best example of this is the bonus episode, Calliope and A Dream of a Thousand Cats. It was just like random. It's like, oh, look, this is in the world of the Sandman, and here's a couple of cool stories that are tossed in there, yet with so much lore. It's just like, oh, Dream was with Calliope, that they had a son, like what's going on there? So I hope you enjoyed this video. Do consider subscribing if you're brand new here to stay up to date. Please give this video a like if you did enjoy it. It helps me boost this out there a little bit more. But I'm going to love you and leave you now, everyone. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day. And I'll see you, fellow Endless, in the next video. Goodbye.